All right. Hello, football fans. Welcome back to week 15 of the 2023 season. Look, we missed a couple of weeks. I was transferring stuff into a computer and then shit at the fan. Both of us forgot last week. You know, it is what it is. It is what it is. But we're here now. We're out here now. Instead of covering like every single thing from basically 3 weeks worth of football, we're just going to go over some playoff stuff and where we're sitting at now. So let's start in the NFC because I think that picture is a lot fuzzier than the AFC. I hate to do this, but we got to start with the Cowboys, man. We gotta. I think the Cowboys are currently proving themselves to be somewhat for real. I think they've played some really solid football against better teams, teams with actual winning records for the first time all season. But they got a solid win over Seattle. They beat the shit out of the Eagles this past week. Man, I hate to say it, but like they're kind of scaring me for an NFC Championship run. I didn't think it would ever be possible, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both understand how much we both hate the Dallas Cowboys. And for once in my lifetime, I picked them to beat the Eagles, and it felt disgusting to do so. Because I truly thought coming into this week, why is my camera out of focus? There we go.
Mine just shut off.
I believed.
What the fuck?
Scuffed.
I'm very scuffed.
But as I was saying, I truly believe that the Cowboys, like coming into this past week, coming into these next few weeks, are the better team. I think that their offense is rolling, their defense is rolling. And I haven't seen the same from the Eagles. Again, we saw them perform against the Bills. Again, our secondary was kind of busted. But I mean, they still put up a hell of a fight, and we played a really good game. So I'm not like taking excuses, but then they were very flat against the Niners. And I again, coming into that, this matchup, I thought there's probably a good chance that they're going to drop this. I just think that their schedule obviously was one of the hardest. Like I don't know if, the Bills would be able to beat everyone on their list. So yeah, no, I think Dallas, I know the main thing was basically they can't beat a winning team, kind of like, the Dolphins, but I mean, I know I texted you, they're facing the Bills next. And I was like, well, Cowboys haven't beaten a good team, and then I thought about it, and I was like, "Oh shit, they kind of have now, right?" So I agree. I think they're starting to slowly prove themselves to be for real here.
Well, and I think the thing that we haven't seen from the Cowboys in a long time is winning when it's important. Like this was a tough stretch of games for the Cowboys, like you mentioned. I think like the idea that they're turning it on even better later in the season rather than earlier in the season, beating good teams when it counts. Like they're in control of the division now, in like a really top heavy division. Like they control the fact that they could potentially play a home game when last year they had a pretty good record and still couldn't get a home game because of the Eagles, right? Like I think they're playing good football when it matters, which we haven't seen in years from the Cowboys. But I think it's also important to put in perspective that like San Francisco is still here. We watched San Francisco throttle the Dallas Cowboys earlier this season, and San Francisco is playing really good football now too. I think like I hate to just break down the schedule and talk wins and losses in a really like they definitely win, they definitely lose, right? But like with three teams tied for the top there, I think we kind of have to go through the rest of their seasons. So San Francisco, even though there's a three-way tie, they own the head-to-head against both Dallas and the Eagles. So theoretically, if San Francisco wins out, there's no possible way in hell they can lose that first seed. The rest of their season is Arizona, Baltimore, Washington, and the Rams. The only real place that I expect them to even have the potential to drop a game is Baltimore.
Agreed.
And Baltimore's a little inconsistent. San Francisco looks like they know how to handle good teams. Like, it's hard for me to believe that San Francisco is going to fall out of the first seed. But then as we go into the division and talk about the Eagles and the Cowboys, they're tied. Dallas currently owns a tiebreaker because of, arbitrary, like all of the other tiebreaker stuff. That one, because their head-to-head is tied 1-1, that one could change, right? So Dallas, the end of Dallas's schedule is Buffalo, Miami, Detroit, Washington. That's at least two tough games, right? Potentially a third, depending on, how good Miami is against a solid team like Dallas, right? The Eagles get Seattle, the Giants, Arizona, and the Giants again, which maybe I'm a homer, but that sounds like 4 wins to me.
I mean, Seattle could put up a fight, but I agree. I think that's most likely 4 wins, 3-1 at worst.
Right. If they go 3-1, like you have to be realistic and say like they have a decent shot at a home playoff game, especially if they win those easy games more handedly, because again, that tiebreaker is up for grabs. Dallas, man, you kind of have to put a whole lot of stock into that Buffalo game. You have to put a whole lot of stock into the Detroit game, especially because Detroit is a realistic opponent you could get in the playoffs. I think it's really tough for Dallas. And like, for the sake of Dallas fans, as much as I hate you and your team, like I really think that like this is the first time in a couple of seasons that like you have to be hopeful that this hot streak continues and like goes really well, that you know you can actually put yourself in a winning position come playoff time, and you don't continue to hear the same things about you haven't made a Super Bowl since 1995.
No, I do agree. I think obviously with the 3 teams being 10-3, I mean yeah, I agree. Niners should probably hold on to it. Eagles looks like maybe they could, bump back up to second. But I think, I mean, again, even with Dallas, facing, Bills, then Lions, and like the Lions are also 9-4. Like if they, depending on their schedule, they could also move up here. So, we'll see. There's a few games in there that are pretty important to the Cowboys. I think if they drop even against the Bills, like it could be pretty ugly in the playoffs for it.
I think it's interesting. So like I know we're kind of counting Detroit out here, like you mentioned, like they could potentially make a push, but I think they need help to move out of that 3 seed, right? So if we're saying that the top end is between those 3 teams, like one of them gets the division in a home game, one of them gets the first overall seed, and then one of them ends up as a wild card and has to play their entire playoff run on the road. Then you get Detroit. We kind of know that they're stuck in there at 3rd. 4th seed is going to be the NFC South, which who gives a shit, to be completely honest. Right. Yeah. Poor them losing to the Eagles or the Cowboys, really. But then I think the bottom end of the NFC also gets super competitive. Presently, the way that it stands is, again, Eagles or Dallas would lock up that 5 seed. The Vikings are then in 6th with a 1-game lead, but then all at 6 and 7, all of them. Green Bay, the Rams, Seattle, Atlanta, New Orleans. That's fucking crazy, dude.
Not including the Giants and Bears, which are both just 1 game behind them.
Right. They could potentially make the playoffs. The only reason I left them off is because that means they have 6 teams to get past, even though it's only 1 game. You need a lot of help with a lot of teams losing in ways that I'm not even 100% sure is possible. But I know we asked this a couple of weeks ago, but I mean, who do we realistically see making the playoffs at this point?
I think Rams have been playing really well since Kyron Williams has returned. So I see them sneaking in. And I think I want to say the Seahawks. But just because I think Green Bay is going to kind of choke. And I don't know. Vikings, they're hanging in for now. But I wouldn't be surprised if I saw them slip out of it.
A couple of weeks ago, as we did this, basically the same conversation, right? I was ready to write Green Bay off, right? That like, I know their record was there, but they weren't that great. They put together a couple of good weeks. Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur look like they've put together a pretty solid offense. This was the first time, like this past week was the first time that under LaFleur, the Packers have ever lost in December. Like, that's kind of insane. They're playing well late in seasons, right? Even this past week, I can't even chalk it up to the Packers losing necessarily, because they did put together a late 4th quarter drive. They forced a turnover. They marched the field. They scored a touchdown to put themselves in the lead. Like before that 2-minute drive, like Tommy fucking DeVito of all goddamn people marches down the field for the Giants, right? But like, I don't even think that was a bad game from the Packers. I think the only team out of those 6 that I can confidently say should belong in the playoffs the way they're playing is Green Bay. But then I'm kind of with you. Like maybe the Vikings because they've got that 1-game cushion. Maybe the Rams because they're playing somewhat okay. Maybe Seattle because they've been the most consistent, right? Like, but man, there's just no faith in me that any one of those teams confidently feels like we're taking this 7 seed and that's that.
I mean, I just think the Rams. I think that'd be my guess or my answer. But I agree. I think, Packers aren't the worst team right now. They're playing hot. So we'll see.
Moving on to the AFC then. I think it's a little less murky, but there's still some parity. So Baltimore currently has a 1-game lead over Miami for the first overall seed in the AFC. Baltimore's schedule is not at all easy. They've got Jacksonville, who's absolutely a competitor, the 49ers, the Dolphins, and the Steelers. And if the Steelers is the easy one there, and the Steelers are still 7-6 playing decent football, right? Like, man, that's rough for Baltimore, especially because Pittsburgh's then a division opponent, and that's the easy one.
Agreed. Yeah, but I mean, I think, let's say, Baltimore explodes, right? They win 2 and they have this cushion. Like, we could also just see them like set all their starters come, the last game. But then, like, I think again, like for the Steelers, I think that's also an important game that you also need to win to make sure you make the playoffs. So like maybe that could help you in general. So
maybe I even still, right? Like, I remember the Pittsburgh-Baltimore rivalry of like through the 2000s where it was just like, how close can we get to murder without actually going to jail, right? They're like, these teams hate each other, and if one can keep the other out of the playoffs, or if Pittsburgh is, even if they're eliminated and they can play spoiler to Baltimore, right? Like, Pittsburgh's going to go hard. I know these things, right? Like it's certainly a possibility that game absolutely matters for both teams, right?
Right.
If we're going to talk about somebody catching up to that first seed, Miami is the closest. They're only 1 game back, right? Miami's schedule is also not at all easy. They get the Jets, the Cowboys, the Ravens, the Bills. Much like I just said about the Ravens and the Steelers, that Miami and Buffalo game is going to be super competitive, right? But then you have to take the Ravens, who are fighting for the number 1 seed, so that head-to-head matters a lot. The Cowboys have been playing really good football. That's tough. Again, if the Jets is the easy one, you still have to put together a couple of wins because you have to make up that 1-game ground. You have a head-to-head and a tough division opponent at the end. I don't think Miami catches up.
I'm going to regret this, okay? I don't see them making the playoffs in general right now. I think they're going to lose all 4.
Wow. Okay. Listen, even if they lose all 4, they've still got a shot at the wild card. Okay. Like there's still some teams at the back end there.
Listen,
we'll cross that bridge. I have Buffalo on my list. We'll get there. I promise. We'll talk about that division.
It's not just that. It's just, I firmly believe, again, like the Cowboys, they've proved themselves a little bit. They're starting to, and I believe they'll continue to do so. But the fucking Dolphins are still frauds, man. Especially losing to Tennessee last night. Oh God, man! I love Will Levis. That's my boy. But it's just how there's that mantra, that both the Cowboys and the Dolphins were teams that beat up on the weaker teams, but can't beat the good teams, right? Well, Dallas beat a decent team, but like Dolphins still haven't yet, and they just lost. And Tyreek Hill's injured now. Depending on how long he's gonna take, he could be next week. Like he played the end of that game, but still, like I think that injury impacts them. I don't think they're as explosive, and those are all. Yes, I agree. The Jets are probably the easiest game of that, but the Jets defense is not to be played with. Like I firmly could see them losing all 4. That's not like a biased judgment. Like I firmly could see them losing all 4 of those games.
I'm not saying it's impossible. I would like to believe that Miami is good enough to win at least one of those games. But I mean, you did mention Tyreek Hill, right? That like Tyreek Hill, we proved last night that Tyreek Hill should be the MVP because of how much worse the Dolphins were on offense without him. His presence makes Tua look like a fucking MVP candidate. But Tyreek Hill's off the field, Tua looks super pedestrian, like you wish he had a concussion and they let Mike White play. I'm going to move on from that because I almost regret that coming out of my mouth. Then the next couple of teams are super interesting, right? If we skip over Miami and say that they definitely can't catch Baltimore, especially if we believe that they can lose all 4, right? So let's talk about Jacksonville and Kansas City. Kansas City's schedule is pretty unreasonably easy for the Chiefs. They've got the Patriots, the Raiders, the Bengals, and the Chargers. The Bengals look at the moment like the most competitive of those teams, and we know that they're without Joe Burrow. They've got some other injury issues, not playing super consistently, even if their past week or two has looked pretty solid with Jake Browning. Kansas City looks like they're winning 4 games, which means Baltimore has to win at least 2. I think.
Yeah. I mean, I can agree with that. I just think the only thing is, again, we've seen the Chiefs drop some easy ones, or what we thought would be easy ones. Like, let's say Green Bay. Like, we both probably went into that week thinking, Chiefs are going to easily, handedly win that. But, here they are losing. So, yes, I wanna agree that, yes, most realistically, they could probably win all four. But they've dropped some stupid ones before, so I wouldn't be surprised if they end up 2-2 out of that.
Well, and to your point, let's sit here on Kansas City for a second, because I want the world to laugh at Patrick Mahomes a little more. This past week, I'm sure that by now anybody interested in listening to this podcast has seen the fact that Kadarius Toney was offsides, and okay, listen. I want to say a couple of things about that, because first and foremost, you had 4 quarters worth of football. One offsides call is not the end of that day, right? You could have scored on several other drives that you didn't. It doesn't come down to the refs shouldn't have called it. Second of all, that was the 5th time in that game that Kadarius Toney lined up offsides, and only the first time they called it. Fuck right off. Kadarius Toney should have been warned, and then warned again, and then penalized twice before this final penalty that they did eventually call. Next, if the Kansas City Chiefs of all fucking teams are about to bitch about stupid, meaningless flags ruining the fucking game, let's go back to the podcast, 5-6 weeks ago, where there should have been 3 flags on the Chiefs on one singular play, and none of them got called so that the Chiefs could win the game. Let's go back to the Super Bowl last year with the ticky-tack fucking pass interference. I defended it then that, like, by the rule of law, it is a pass interference, and the Eagles had other opportunities to win that game. And I say that as a Homer Eagles fan. Fuck off, Patrick Mahomes. Fuck right off. Anyway, with all of that said, now that my soapbox is done and over with, they have lost stupid ones, and I think that their mentals are not as strong going into the late season as it usually is for them the past, 5 years. I think that in years past, they could have walked into Buffalo and played very confidently that they were going to win, even when Buffalo was better than they are now. I don't think that they could walk into Buffalo and Patrick Mahomes is going to throw multiple tantrums because they're doing really great. Like, I think the Chiefs are in a really fragile place right now mentally that, like, yes, while on paper they are better than all 4 of those teams, I'm with you that they could drop a couple. All I'm pointing out is the math in that if Kansas City is expected to win all 4, and they do, whether they do or not, they still need, if they win all 4, Baltimore only has to win 2 of those games. Their task sounds a whole lot easier if they beat Jacksonville and Pittsburgh versus having to win Jacksonville and 49ers and Miami and Pittsburgh. Like, that's easy for Baltimore to hang on.
I agreed. I believe Baltimore just has it.
Right. And then the last team that theoretically could catch up, at least as far as current division winners, we'll get to Cleveland in a second, but for Jacksonville, their opponents are Baltimore, which you have to assume 2 games back and wanting that first overall seed, you have to win that head-to-head. Then they've got Tampa, Carolina, and the Titans. Titans have proved that they can win some dumb games. 3 of those sound winnable for Jacksonville, but if they only win 3, Baltimore only has to win 1, and if they win the head-to-head versus Jacksonville, it's over. So I think Jacksonville is in a super interesting spot where their hopes for the first overall seed come down to this week.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, it is interesting. I think that, Jags are just in a weird spot, man. Like, looking at it right now, and
Clearly, they need a little help from Baltimore, but Baltimore's schedule, it being difficult, could be that
seems
help.
Unlikely. Yeah,
they just have, like, Jacksonville just has to fight their way through Baltimore and then play their cards right. Like, their season kind of comes down to this week, at least in terms of seeding for this season. Before we get into all the other wildcard teams, I want to start with Cleveland, because theoretically, Cleveland could take the first overall seed. As insane as that sounds coming out of my mouth, they obviously need help from Kansas City, Miami, and Jacksonville to lose some games so that Cleveland can catch up record-wise. But then they can take the division from Baltimore, and I think their schedule is okay to do it. They get the Bears, the Texans, the Jets, the Bengals. All of those are winnable. I'm not saying that we should favor them in all of those games. I think the Texans are a struggle. I think the Bengals have the potential to be a struggle. Like you mentioned, the Jets' defense is really good. Cleveland is not notoriously great at offense this season. So I don't know that these are like guaranteed wins, but Cleveland has the potential, even currently lined up from the wild card.
Yeah, I mean, just because they have the potential, though, doesn't mean that they're gonna do it. And unreasonably, I don't believe they'll do it. But I mean, it would definitely shake everything up if they did. But yeah, I just don't see that happening, though, unfortunately for them.
The only defense I'll give them is that like their defense is playing like deep playoff run good. I don't want to call them Super Bowl good like I did for the Jets defense last year, right? Like I don't think they're that good, but I think that they are playing solid. They're like withstanding really good offenses and playing well. Their offense seems to be able to keep up. Even this week, Joe Flacco comes in as a brand new quarterback to the system, throws for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, right? Like, I don't think that it would be fair to count Cleveland out and say, yeah, I don't think they can. Like, their schedule lines up in such a way at the end of the year that I think that there's potential. It shouldn't go unmentioned. But for the last 2 wild card spots, we've got 6 teams at 7-6. I'm not going over the schedules for all of these because I will mention every team in the league 3 fucking times. It's not going to happen. But at 7-6, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Houston, Denver, Cincinnati, Buffalo. For your sake, let's start with Buffalo. I think they did the hard part in beating the Chiefs. That's a mental hurdle that the Bills have not been able to overcome recently. So I think that's actually a huge deal, even if it's not the same Chiefs from years past. I think that's a really big deal. Buffalo's schedule is tough. Like we mentioned a couple of pods ago, that like you had to beat Kansas City and Dallas and Miami to feel comfortable with getting a playoff berth, right? But like Buffalo's put a lot of good games together in a row. The only real falter they had was the overtime against the Eagles, and the rest of that game was really good. I think even if Buffalo is technically last by tiebreakers, you have to feel good about Buffalo.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that, beating the Chiefs was definitely a must. Not just, to keep our playoff dreams alive, but I believe that we needed it. And yeah, I agree. I think this gives us, the confidence, maybe the momentum that, we've put back to back, really good games together. Maybe we can actually go into Dallas and, win this. So I think that was actually really good. And if we had lost by a little bit, it would have been just as bad as just losing by a lot. So I think it was a good confidence booster for us, and I think we'll be ready for Dallas now.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask a tough question. Let's pretend Buffalo doesn't make the playoffs, and I want you to pick 2 of those other 5 teams that you would feel as most realistic. I only say don't include Buffalo because I don't want Buffalo played a good game to be the influence of all of it, right? Like if we're going to have 2 people competing out of those other 5 teams, who do you put there?
All right. I think I put the Steelers and I think I put the Broncos.
Okay. I'm with you on the Broncos. I think they're playing much better football than we have accounted for. I think that their record is not as good as they are. I'm with you on the Broncos. Up until this week, I would have said Houston, but I think those injuries are just going to be too much. We'll get to some injury stuff in a minute because I think there's a lot of shakeups here towards the end of the season. But for Houston specifically, Tank Dell with an injury problem, CJ Stroud with an injury problem, Nico Collins potentially missing a few weeks. Man, that's 3 really big pieces on offense. That hurts what Houston's been doing well. I think that if I have to discount Buffalo, right, like giving you the same parameters as I'm taking, I think my other team is Indy. I think Kenny Pickett has been playing better football for Pittsburgh. Now that he's injured, I don't know if Pittsburgh looks the same. I know they have that Mike Tomlin effect where they're always going to finish 500 or better. I know it's going to happen, right? But I think that Indianapolis has been quietly playing better football than Pittsburgh. I think because the fact that they're already there by tiebreakers, they don't have to play that well to keep their spot. I realistically, if I have to pick 2 teams, it's Denver and Buffalo. If I have to discount Buffalo, I think Indy's my next one.
So, I mean, I would have said Indy coming into this week, but again, they just lost to the Bengals, which of course we needed them to, so we could get into this position. And I'm going to be rooting against the Colts. But I mean, again, coming into this week, I would have definitely agreed. I would have said, probably the Colts and Broncos just because I think Broncos are playing a little bit better and, Colts are there. But losing to the Bengals, I think hurts. And again, we saw the kind of impact that, losing their, Jonathan Taylor hurt. And I just feel like the Steelers, man, they're still winning ugly games. That's why I put the Steelers in, and I think Broncos. I mean, again, I would have also said Texans, but those injuries are a little bit too much. I think Broncos will sneak in, but I think just because of the ugly wins, Pittsburgh's going to be there somehow.
So now I'm going to ask a tough question that pertains more to the AFC than the NFC. I think for all season long, we've kind of counted the NFC top end as being significantly better than the bottom end. But I think in the AFC, some of those bottom teams can beat the top teams. I wouldn't find it necessarily surprising if Denver or Buffalo or Cleveland goes and beats one of these division winners on the road. So what teams, I guess, do we expect to make a deep run versus just getting there in this wild card race?
So I think the teams that could do the most damage against the top teams are actually on the outside of the playoff picture right now. So I think it's going to be the Broncos, Bengals, Bills, and Chargers. Even the Chargers, who again, they like a few bounces here and there, they could be a different team entirely. But I mean, again, since they're looking out, like they're not making any run right now. But like looking at the 6 and 7, like let's just we're putting in like if it just ended today, I think the Steelers could maybe win a game just because it's gonna be an ugly game and they know how to win ugly games. I just don't see the Colts. Maybe with Jonathan Taylor back, they could make a little deeper of a run. Browns are just going to make it just to make it. I don't think they're going to make a deep playoff push. I mean, Jags can make a deeper push. I don't think the Chiefs are, as good. They're not, the Titans they once were, especially this season. So, I mean, realistically, a few bounces here and there. Maybe the Colts could beat the Chiefs too. I don't know.
It's interesting to me that you were so quick to discount the Browns, right? Like, again, I think their defense is really good. They create takeaways. They put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And I think that's super important against teams like Miami, against Jacksonville, against Kansas City, right? That like I don't know that I would be surprised to see Cleveland in an AFC championship game. I think I'd be surprised to see them as the Super Bowl contender for the AFC. But if it's one less game and they end up in an AFC championship because of one game, one bounce, one whatever, I don't see it being so difficult to put them there. The other team, I would have said Houston without all the injuries. Denver maybe wins a game. I don't see them taking multiple, but Buffalo is the next one that would really scare me as one of those top teams, especially the way that they've been playing. I think especially if they beat Dallas this week, where they've had 3 really tough games in a row that they, are competitive in all of them. I think then Buffalo would scare me more than just about anybody else on that list. I think there's a real potential for one of these wild card teams to take a shot, beat some teams on the top end.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. If I'll go this far. If we beat Dallas, I think we could beat the Niners straight up. But we got to beat Dallas first. No, I think playing the Eagles, yes, we lost by 3. We beat the Chiefs. We're going to beat the Cowboys. I think we could take them. Maybe we wouldn't win, but we'd be in that game. And I think more so than the Eagles have put up against them. I'm
not even disagreeing with you entirely. I'm not saying, no, fuck you, you're wrong. I guess just I find it weird to use Dallas as the measuring stick for that, right? They were a better team than the Eagles when the Bills played the Eagles. No doubt in my mind, right? But the Eagles weren't even close to San Francisco. So even if you can say we were the better team and lost, we're competitive on the similar level with the Eagles, that still puts you on pace to lose 42-19 to the Niners, right? I find Dallas being the measuring stick to maybe be a little fraudulent. Maybe if they go out and beat Dallas 60-10, I'll say that they look as good as the Niners. But yeah, just beating them might be a stretch to me.
Who knows? I think remember we had this conversation, any 3-game series, I believe Bills win all of them against any team. I think the Niners would be tough, but I think we could beat them in a 3-game series.
Man, I believed that last year until the playoffs came around. I do not believe that this year. All right. I think it's important both for fantasy and just in general to talk about the injuries late in the season, especially with so many teams still being in the mix, right? I mentioned a couple of things already earlier that Joe Flacco was starting for Cleveland and very clearly looks still competent. I cannot believe for the life of me that dude was in the Super Bowl 18 years ago and he shows up with a brand new team, throws 303 touchdowns, dude. Like, Joe Flacco needs to go away somewhere, but still in and doing the damn thing. Houston, I already mentioned. Tank Dell, CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, all facing some injuries. I didn't necessarily read as to if any of them were going to be longer term or done for the season kind of thing, but you have to imagine that, like, if these guys can play at 70%, they're going to want them to because they're on that cusp of the playoffs, right? So, important injuries. Some other ones here, though. Justin Jefferson. The dude took one pass catch, got absolutely drilled over the middle, left again. Now, I'm worried about Jefferson. I'm worried about the guy.
I mean, so I saw a report that said he might play this coming week. But yeah, I mean, again, just in general, he's finally back out, and then one catch in, he's got to go back for chest pain. Like, I almost wouldn't even play him the rest of the season. Like, I think it's a little bit different. I mean, they are still in the playoff hunt, but like, how much more damage do you want to do to your, corner piece receiver? So I don't know.
Especially with the quarterback issues, right? I mean, they benched Dobbs and then Dobbs came in again and then an injury question. And I think that there are enough questions around Minnesota that even if you're in the playoff picture, like you probably want to play your future a little safer. So, but man, Justin Jefferson coming in, literally one catch gets drilled across the middle. Like, that's terrifying stuff. Similarly, an important injury, Justin Herbert. You mentioned the Chargers earlier. They're not super far out of this playoff push, although they need a lot more help than some other teams in the AFC. And Keenan Allen, who, if I remember correctly, you told me before the podcast started recording that he was done for the year.
Justin Herbert's done.
Oh, okay. Well, Justin Herbert's done for the year, and I mixed up my Chargers injuries. Even still, who the hell's throwing the ball to Keenan Allen that makes them relevant, that like they feel like they could make a push? Like, this is a big blow to the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. I like almost at this point, even if like Keenan Allen has this like questionable designation, like coming into the next few weeks, you're almost so far out of the playoff picture that without Justin Herbert, like I would rather play, safer, make sure, my star receiver, maybe even Eckler, who's always dealt with injuries. Maybe you don't want to expose him too much. And like, I don't know.
Yeah, Eckler's the weird one for me because he's for the most part been healthy most of the season and then just hasn't been getting the touches. But like, again, if you're dealing without Justin Herbert, like you kind of put the ball in Eckler's hands even more, which it just makes for a weird position to this season. I'm kind of with you that like you might want to chalk this one up and see what kind of draft pick you can get. The Packers, we talked about them as being a potential playoff favorite to get into one of those last couple of NFC spots. Christian Watson with an injury, Aaron Jones with an injury. Those are two pretty big pieces with such a young core. I mean, these could be really damaging for the Packers. I still think that the right pieces are there, that they will be competitive. They don't need to worry about sitting or taking time off or chalking up the season, but like that hurts their chances to win some of these games.
I mean, agreed. It's not, AJ Dillon, by far is a really good backup, but he's no, running back one. And then their number one wide receiver in Christian Watson also out. So yeah, like I think they'll still be competitive. I think they have, their backups are still really good, but I think it's an entirely different team. And again, we haven't seen Aaron Jones a lot this season. Like we saw him the first week where, he exploded. They looked really good. And then he got injured. And we haven't really seen the same, and he's on and off with injury. So, like, it definitely does hurt. But Packers are still a little. Their backups are still really good. So,
yeah, I guess the only question mark there for me is that like if you can't put the Giants away of all teams, right? That like I think it just makes Christian Watson and Aaron Jones look all that much more important. Again, you said their backups are really good, right? AJ Dillon has been pretty solid this season. Of course, he's no Aaron Jones, but not many guys are. There is still a super talented, super young receiving core for Green Bay. Like I don't think Christian Watson is the end all be all of their season, but still, I just think it's important to recognize before this last few stretches of games. I regret bringing this one up. I hate talking about it, but here we are. Zach Wilson is on the IR. I'm not even sure what's wrong at this point. Just that he doesn't want to play. I don't know if like having sanity is considered an injury for the New York Jets, but no Zach Wilson is basically what we're learning here. But Aaron Rodgers practiced as of last week, a limited participant in practice. Fuck. I hate that I'm asking the question because I've shit on it all season long, but man, are we going to see Aaron Rodgers?
Listen, I've been the one updating you with all of that because I know it pisses you off every time I see a report, and then I send it, and you're like, "There's no way that man tore his fucking Achilles." Every time,
there's no fucking way.
Yeah, I firmly believe we are going to see Aaron Rodgers play again this season, but I will say that is also very dependent on where the Jets. So right now, the Jets are 14th. Very far outside the playoff picture. He did say one of the conditions to coming back, even, just in general, maybe he's just ramping up, but he said to play, they need to be somewhere in the conversation. And they're not even close. So I almost yes, I agree. I think it's incredible that he's making a comeback and, he's been recovering or blah, 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 whatever he says he's doing, right? But I wouldn't play him. I think you're so far out that I think you just continue to develop your younger quarterbacks and don't risk further injury to your franchise quarterback. Yeah.
Man, my only issue here, right, is that if Zach Wilson is considered injured, they're not going to activate him because I don't fucking want Zach Wilson back, right? At this point, I don't think we're going to see that dude in a Jets jersey again, if not this season, right? So my issue here is then if there's a lack of depth in the quarterback room, if Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play because they're not competitive, why the fuck is he practicing? Why is he taking snaps with the team if you don't intend to do something with him or leave him on the sideline as a backup, right? The depth in that room is not deep. I hate it. I wanted to say that even if he was quote unquote ready, it wasn't going to happen because they weren't going to be competitive. But with Zach Wilson not playing, man, I hate it. We're going to see Aaron Rodgers this season. I fucking hate it, dude. It makes me so outrageously angry. There's no way he tore his fucking Achilles, but he says he did 1,000,000 times over, and he's going to goddamn play this season. We're going to see him in a Jets uniform after an Achilles injury fucking 14 weeks ago. I'm so angry. I'm so fucking angry. I need to move away from this one because this last one on my list kind of ties into our final conversation today. Tyreek Hill. We brought him up a little bit earlier, but I think it's really important to sit on this one again because he's a super influential piece. First of all, Tyreek Hill is your MVP. Proved it absolutely with numbers. I don't care what anybody says. Fuck you if you're going to vote for a quarterback. You're wrong. It's Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill being out for a portion of that game last night really indicated to me how important he is to that team. That team, like you said, their offense is not nearly as explosive without multiple weapons in Hill and Waddle. Tua looked super fucking pedestrian without Tyreek Hill. It was kind of an embarrassment of what was an otherwise really great offense this season, simply by having Tyreek Hill not on the field. I know that they said that there's the potential he plays again this week, like you mentioned, but man, I think Miami's in a precarious spot trying to hold on to the division lead. When Buffalo is able to catch up, you kind of need Tyreek to play, and that's got to get scary when he's coming off this injury.
Agreed. I think let's say Tyreek Hill's out, right? And even if it's not for the full 4 games, right? But those 3 games, the next 2 games are impossible without your best receiver. Granted, yes, it's Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill. He changes the game for them. And I think it's so significant. Again, we saw it. And I don't believe there's even any way they're kind of in those other games, even with the other offensive pieces they have, if you can't even beat the Titans, man.
Right. And like you mentioned, even as we go back to the schedule a little bit, right? You said that the Jets defense is really good. Okay. The Miami's offense is good, but it struggles against the Jets if they don't have Tyreek Hill, since Tennessee's defense is not nearly as good as the Jets. finding a way to beat the Cowboys, the Ravens, or the Bills, depending on how long, if he's out at all, right? To do that without Tyreek Hill, or even a lesser version of Tyreek Hill, those games seem almost insurmountable, man. Like, it seems so tough from what we saw last night, and taking that to play tougher games than the Titans that you couldn't win just because Tyreek Hill's not on the field. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. The reason we bring up Tyreek Hill, our last conversation today, who the hell is the MVP this season? I want you to run again. Noah, you ran through some numbers before the podcast as far as gambling odds for who the MVP is. I'm ready to be enraged. Please hit me with the numbers again.
All right. So at the beginning of I just want to point out, before the Cowboys and Eagles played, it was Brock Purdy. Okay. Just want to point that out. Brock Purdy was the favorite. But now, after that game, Dak Prescott is now your favorite at plus 160. Brock Purdy comes in at second at plus 200. And then we take a really big jump to Lamar Jackson at plus 700. Jalen Hurts at plus 900. And then Tua and Tyreek are tied with each other at plus 1200. And then we get Mahomes, Josh Allen, and then after Josh Allen, both of, like, even as a Bills fan, man, I love Josh Allen, but I do not think he's better than Christian McCaffrey. And Christian McCaffrey ranks 9th in MVP betting favorites.
It's so insane to me. I'm not mad about the order that those guys go in. I'm very mad about the odds. Okay. I want to say this, as much as it hurts, I think that the way that MVP voting has gone, and fully acknowledging that it's going to go to a quarterback, even though I believe them all to be undeserving this year, it should be Dak Prescott. I hate that just came out of my mouth. But he's playing incredible football. He's a really good quarterback, tied for the league, like the best record in the league. And I think that he has performed significantly better than other teams with the same record. Fine, so be it. If you want to put Lamar Jackson there, I'm not sure that he quite belongs in the conversation, but again, I get it. Good record, plays quarterback, does a lot for the team. Not upset about it. I am upset that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are as close as they are. Not because I don't believe them to be good players, but I believe Patrick Mahomes has had a significantly down year and doesn't look as impressive as any of the other quarterbacks on this list, Josh Allen included. Josh Allen has had turnovers where I believe that he is responsible for a lot of the Bills' losses, and they're struggling for a playoff position. Hard for me to consider an MVP with their circumstance. Again, don't get me wrong, they're both incredible players, and in future seasons, I wholeheartedly believe that both of them will win MVPs, out of the question, but this year, maybe not. I've said it several weeks now that I don't believe that Jalen Hurts deserves an MVP. I think he's looked pretty pedestrian for a lot of games. As an Eagles fan, I can kind of chalk some of that, or a lot of that, up to coaching and the fact that their offense is run by somebody wearing a blindfold. But either way, Jalen Hurts has not performed to the level where he deserves it. My issue then comes into the fact that the two standout best players this season are Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey. The idea that Brock Purdy is an MVP that is 10 times more likely to win the MVP than Christian McCaffrey, who's a better player on his own team, is asinine to me. I believe wholeheartedly that even with his injury, if he doesn't play the next 4 weeks, it should still be Tyreek Hill, especially compounded after what we've seen last night. But we watched Brock Purdy play 3 games in a row without Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, and all of a sudden Brock Purdy couldn't do shit, and he lost 3 games in a row because he's not good enough. I hate that we're ignoring that because you go, well, the 49ers are really good. Who cares about that McCaffrey guy who's doing half their offense? Fuck, dude. How? Like, I am so frustrated that this is the way that the gambling odds look when it's so clear cut that Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey, even Micah Parsons, are more important to their teams at this point in time than the quarterbacks are. It's absolutely outrageous.
Which, I mean, again, that's what you were saying, right? Is like the most valuable player to their team. And I think if it was you and I debating and making this choice, I think we could easily say after last night, it's Tyreek Hill, because we saw the difference that team was tremendously worse without Tyreek Hill. But then, when he gets back on, they look a little bit better. And we've seen how good they look with Tyreek Hill. So I think between us, like if we had to pick right now and we were, in Vegas, I think we'd be picking Tyreek Hill. But again, it never goes to a skill position. It's always the QB of the best team. And, it's just.
Look, so I last year's MVP race, right? I think that by the end of the season, it was a 2-horse race, right? It was Mahomes and Hurts. I think that Mahomes did not have a Mahomesian MVP caliber season. They played they played really well. Obviously, Mahomes is one of, if not the best players in the NFL. Like bar none, like it is what it is, right? I'm not even upset that the MVP went to him, right? I think that there was an argument to be made that Jalen Hurts missing 3 games last year and the Eagles still winning 2 of those 3 with Gardner Minshew Hurts's chances for MVP, right?
Right.
I think you have to look at things the same way with Tyreek Hill. We've called the Dolphins offense explosive and outrageous all season long. We marveled at the fact that a team could, in this era where defense is so much better than it was in years past, the ability to still score 70 points, right? I recognize that there were other good players that day and that the Broncos defense was worse than stationary fucking trash cans. I get it, right? But we've marveled at how good their offense is all season long. We watched them turn into nobodies last night for a half of football because Tyreek Hill wasn't on the field. I don't know how any voter can rationally look at that and say it should be someone other than Tyreek Hill. We've watched Dak have down weeks. We watched Purdy have down weeks. Hurts, Mahomes, Allen. We've watched them all lose football games for their teams. The quarterbacks are down. There should be no reason on earth that it doesn't go to a skill position player instead of a quarterback.
Agreed.
Drives me fucking nuts. I'm agitated. If it's Brock Purdy, dude, I'm rioting. I don't know where they do these votes at, but I will march on every voter's house who votes on Brock Purdy, dude. I just, one strongly worded letter on each of their doorsteps, man. I'm going to be so angry if it's Brock Purdy. For the love of God, at this point, I'm rooting for it to be Dak Prescott as much as I will hate to see him win that award. I will be rooting for it to be Dak just so that it's not Brock Purdy because, my God, is there somebody less deserving. Holy shit, I'm so agitated. All right. I think we can kind of skip over fantasy at this point. You're in your playoffs, so you're not. I think you've probably got it figured out. Just be careful of injuries. That's all we really got to say. We're going to turn this to gambling. I kind of don't even want to talk about a few weeks ago, to be completely real. Noah was 6-6-1. I was 3-9-1. It was bad a couple of weeks ago. I will give Noah his props because he sent me a picture of his parlay last week, even though we didn't have the podcast. Dude only lost 1 game, and it was that shitty 3-0 Vikings game. Garbage football.
Could have won so much money.
Yeah. But Noah's got me by about 15 games, so I think this season's chalked up, and we're only doing this as a formality now, to be completely real with you. Anyway, for this week, lines are provided by FanDuel as of Tuesday. They are subject to change. Please gamble responsibly. Remember that we're not providing gambling advice, solely providing our picks. If your loved one has a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. I started off, I got the Chargers and the Raiders. Raiders are up -3.
Well, we know how this turned out last week, so I'm going Chargers because Eckler's going to be relied on, and last time I went with the Raiders, they fucking scored 0, so...
I took the Raiders just because I think it's going to be hard to replace Justin Herbert. I think Keenan Allen's a big deal. It could be a competitive game, and I wouldn't be surprised, but it feels kind of silly to not take the Raiders. I've got Minnesota, Cincinnati. Bengals are 3.5 favorites at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to go Bengals here just because they played a pretty decent game. I still believe Vikings are just not there. I just saw a report that says Nick Mullins is going to start QB against Bengals. So I'm definitely going Bengals. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm taking the Bengals. There's too many questions for me in Minnesota. Jefferson being in and then out again means they're doing 2 different game plans in 2 different weeks. Jake Browning's look solid. I think 3.5 is honestly probably too tight. I'll take the Bengals. I've got Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, playoff implications. So competitive, I hope. I've got Colts by 2.5.
Well, I need a make sure Colts don't win. So Steelers, it's going to be an ugly game anyways. They win ugly games.
All right. I took the Colts. I think they've been playing sneaky good football. In Pittsburgh, they've kind of fallen off the past couple of weeks. I'll take Indy. Denver, Detroit. I think this is going to be a really good game, but I've got Detroit by 4.5.
Oh, I can't believe I'm about to say this. Oh. No, actually, I'm going to go Lions because I need the Broncos to lose. So I'm going Lions just solely because that's what I need to happen.
Man's just gambling with his rooting interest, and he's still going to beat me this week. It's incredible. I'm taking Denver. I don't know why. It was just kind of a gut thing. I think both of them are really good, but I guess if you're going to give Denver 4.5, I kind of feel like I have to.
Listen, I was going to go Denver, but then I realized I needed them to lose. So.
Yeah. I've got Tampa Bay and Green Bay. Packers are 3.5 favorites.
I'm going Bucks here. I still believe they're the better team. I know Mike Evans just shit the bed, but I believe they're going to put a better performance together. I'm going to go Bucks here.
Against my better interest, I took Green Bay.
I kind of figured you would, actually.
Yeah, look, the injuries scare me a little bit, but I think Green Bay has looked significantly better over the past couple of weeks. That it's hard for me to pick against them, to be completely honest. Tampa Bay has been a decent team this season, but like they're still in the NFC South. All right, I got the Giants and the Saints. New Orleans is a 6-point favorite.
Yeah, I'm taking Saints here. I think that's pretty fair. Yeah.
I also took New Orleans, even though 6 feels a little crazy, watching fucking Tommy DeVito run a 2-minute drill and win a football game this past week. Like that, what the fuck? I still can't believe that happened. I've got Atlanta, Carolina. Falcons are 3-point favorites on the road.
Yeah, I mean, Panthers are still the Panthers. So, yeah, I'm going to go Falcons just because I anticipate they're the better team.
I also took the Falcons, but even though I just made fun of you for rooting interests, I'm also kind of rooting for the Bears to both make the playoffs and have the first overall pick, because I'm going to laugh really hard at Carolina for not only taking the wrong guy, but then giving the Bears the first overall pick again. I've got Houston, Tennessee. Titans are 2.5 favorites.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think Texans are. I think they're still the better team, even with the injuries. Titans are still too inconsistent for me. I'm gonna go Texans here.
I took Tennessee. Look, Will Levis had a good game. I think their offense kind of worked. They beat a good Miami team. Houston's injuries are a lot that I kind of don't have faith in their offense to score, so I'm taking the Titans. Neither one really feels great to me here, though, to be honest. I've got Jets and the Dolphins. Miami is an 8.5 favorite at home.
Well, like I said, I firmly believe they could lose all 4. So Jets on this one.
Oh, Jesus, dude. No, I'm taking Miami. Look, I don't know who's playing quarterback for the Jets this week, to be honest, because Zach Wilson is refusing. Aaron Rodgers isn't ready, and they're not a competitor. Like, who the fuck is starting in New York this week? Like, even though I know Flacco is a Brown, I'm still not convinced he's not starting for the Jets this week. Even with 8.5 points, I have to take Miami, dude. Come on now.
I'll go throw for them. I will personally make sure they lose this one. Bills Mafia. I'll just be rooting that on the sideline.
Oh man. I've got Chicago, Cleveland. Browns are 3.5 favorites.
I'm actually gonna take the Bears here just because I know Browns are the better team, but Bears are kind of sneaky. I mean, they just beat the Lions, so I'm gonna ride the hot hand in the Bears.
Yeah. Plus, Justin Jefferson or Justin
DJ Moore.
Justin Fields is the best. A better gambling favorite for MVP than fucking Christian McCaffrey. Fuck no, I'm taking the Browns, dude. I think the Browns are a good football team. Chicago doesn't scare me that much, and as much as I say that I want Chicago to make the playoffs, like it's still the Bears, dude. Come on now. I've got Kansas City, New England. Chiefs are 9.5 favorites on the road.
Dude, I just think that's too big. Like, we haven't seen them be, this offensive explosion like recent years. Patriots, again, they make teams play ugly games. So it's in Foxborough. I know this coming week's going to be dog shit. So I'm going Patriots just because that spread is way too big for me.
Okay, so for me, I took Kansas City, but I really don't like it because I'm in exactly the same boat as you are, all right? The problem for me is Kansas City either sucks like all hell because they're mentally not right, and they like either just barely win or they lose to New England, okay? Which is already fucking insane to me. But the other alternative is that Kansas City gets so mad at Kadarius Toney that they just like, fuck you, we're building the offense without him, we're going hard, and they're going to score 65 points this week, right? Like, it's going to be one or the other. I took Kansas City because I feel like if I take New England plus 9.5 and they lose by 40, I'm going to feel worse than if they lose this game. So I'll take KC. I've got Washington and the Rams. LA is a 6.5 favorite.
Yeah, I'm going to go Rams here just because, again, I think they're playing decent football since Kyron Williams is back. I think they're starting to kind of find their form. So I'm going Rams here.
I'm with that. Washington's just kind of bad. I'll credit to Sam Howell having a decent season, but they turned the ball over too much. The Rams are playing well. It felt pretty easy. San Francisco, Arizona. Niners are 13.5 favorites. Quickest time I've ever typed in San Francisco in my life.
Yep, Niners all the
way. Probably game of the week. Dallas, Buffalo. Buffalo is a 2.5 favorite at home. I know you're taking Buffalo.
We're the fucking favorites, dude. That is crazy to me. But yeah, I'm going Buffalo all the way.
I took Dallas only because it feels like the smart gambling play.
Wow.
But yeah, look, you can be as mad as you want. You picked against the Eagles this past week, and I'm pretty sure the week before, too, so you can get right out of here.
Well, I was on both weeks, wasn't I?
Yeah, fuck off. But I genuinely, I just think it's the smart gambling play. I think Dallas comes in on paper better than Buffalo. If you're going to also add points to them, it's hard to pick against them just for picking spreads. This game could realistically go either way, and I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe the most important game this weekend, as we talked about earlier, I've got Baltimore and Jacksonville. Baltimore's a 3.5 favorite on the road.
Yeah, I feel like Ravens are probably going to keep rolling. Again, Jags didn't look... I mean, they still played pretty well, but they started off slow, so I'm going to go Ravens here. I think they're still the better team.
I'm also with the Ravens. As much as I want to believe in Jacksonville's ability to compete, I just feel like they haven't done it yet, and if Baltimore's the cream of the crop currently in the AFC, it feels tough that Jacksonville takes them out. Last game, Monday night, Philadelphia, Seattle. Eagles are 3.5 favorites.
Seahawks are gonna shit on them. I'm kidding. I'm going Eagles. As much as I wanted to go 3 weeks in a row against your Eagles, I think we have a bounce back week here.
Yeah, I don't think that 3.5 is enough respect to the Eagles. I know they haven't played well the past 2 weeks, but to be honest, like, I don't think you can play that poorly with a team as good as the Eagles are and win by less than 3.5. Like, I hate picking the Eagles, and I almost always pick against them in tough games, but I don't see them winning by less than 4 in this one. All right, I already did my gambling spiel, and we've been here damn near an hour. So I think we're going to wrap this one up. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We will catch you here next week. Adios.
Adios.